Hi everyone. I'm so glad that I'd be part of this second lecture series of international seminar conducted by SSUS Kaladi in collaboration with Buddha Sangama. I'm so thankful to Dr. Ajay Shekhar for calling me to present this paper. And my topic is Sahodaran, Ayyappan and Buddhism in Kerala. So yesterday I was having a conversation with a bunch of friends of mine. We were talking about the tragic incident that was happening in Wayanad. And unexpectedly one of my friends said that there is some peculiar feature associated with the face of tragedies all the time, especially among Malayalis and South Indian people. The people all over India, all over the world, will join hands together to support or engage themselves in harmony, in a harmonious manner to raise their solidarity with the people who are suffering. And especially this solidarity or brotherhood and the feeling of oneness that actually comes in the face of tragedies. And that is the reason why most of the time there is something peculiar about South Indian people's legacy or tradition when it comes to the concept of equality, liberty and fraternity. So I was thinking that was quite natural, because we have this cultural tradition of kindness, a sort of maitri associated with the feeling of oneness associated with art, culture and tradition. And I was thinking, where does it comes from? Is there a history behind it? When you talk about Sahodaran, the word Sahodaran itself, that moniker Sahodaran itself means brotherhood. And that moniker has been attributed to Ayyappan due to his own transformative and reformative actions that he had conducted throughout the society in which he lived. And when it comes to this traditional history of this kind of a brotherhood, we would definitely end up in another word, that is the word of religion, a traditional religion named Buddhism. So Buddhism preaches us, Buddhism taught us the core values of humanity, which include this brotherhood, liberty, equality and maitri concepts. So that is the reason why all over the world, when some tragic incident struck us, we feel this fraternity of oneness. The harmonious coexistence is an inevitable factor that we need to brought about. So I was thinking about it when this kind of a topic comes to me at that point of time. So there is a nice observation made by J. Reku, a critic, in one of the preface to the biography written by Dr. Ajay Shekhar on Sahodaran Ayyappan. In that preface, he is actually telling us there are two phases to Kerala Renaissance. One phase is a religio-reformist kind of movement propounded by Sri Narayana Guru. And the second one is a revolutionary, radical kind of movement that is actually formulated by Sahodaran Ayyappan. So this can be an observation which feels like working in opposition to each other. But according to me, I always found that the principles of Sri Narayana Guru as well as his disciple Sahodaran Ayyappan works in collaboration with each other for Kerala modernity and thereby realizing Kerala Renaissance a reality. That is what I felt most of the times. And that's the reason why when some bunch of people, some group of people have said to Sri Narayana Guru about Sahodaran Ayyappan that Guru, he is actually talking about nonsense kind of things all over wherever he goes, like telling people that there is no God, no religion, no caste and all. The way he replied to that comment was something we need to think about right now. The reply that Guru gives us, even though Sahodaran says that there is no God and all, whatever actions that he put forth had the reflection of God in it. That's quite enough. So this is the embracing of polyphonic voices that you see in Guru and the trail of his disciples in that made Kerala Renaissance a reality in 19th century. So how does Sahodaran Ayyappan could do this kind of a reformation in our Kerala history is a big question that we need to ponder. So thinking about that, we can say that he is the first person who democratized the language of Malayalam He is the first person who have created this public space or public sphere, an inevitable kind of platform for the social discourses to happen. All these are reality. And where does that basic core or the basic concept he actually derived for all these kinds of things to happen? Dr. Ajay Shekhar calls it as Sahodaranism or Ayyappanism. And I would say that this is basically because he believed in the core spiritual concept of Buddhism. Because just like Ambedkar, who actually talked about this in 1954 All India Radio, where he says that he had taken these three human values, that means liberty, equality and fraternity, into the Indian constitution, not from French Revolution, but from an Indian religion, and that is Buddhism. So that is the reason why the neo-Buddhist movements of Ambedkar, a neo-Buddha or neo-Buddhist movement of Ambedkar was being supported by Sahodaran Ayyappan. And when you look at 1920s history of Kerala, you can see the neo-Buddhist movement emerged with especially Midavadi Krishnan in the forefront, along with C.V. Kunyiraman and Sahodaran Ayyappan as a supporting factor behind it. So this movement was made possible by these three forerunners in the annals of history. So that is another factor that I need to mention among this. So what happened during 19th century is the revival of neo-Buddhist movement, because we had a tradition of Buddhist legacy long back from the time of King Ashoka, starting from 3rd century BC onwards, because the great missionaries of Buddhist followers have actually reached South India, especially in Sri Lanka. And from Sri Lanka, they have reached the land of Kerala. The land of Sri Lanka was also named as the land of Edom. And that is the reason why the followers of Buddhism who came from the land of Sri Lanka were being called as Edavas, is another point of view given by many of the historians of the time. But until 10th or 8th or 9th century, this tradition of egalitarianism, this tradition of ethics, the tradition of dharma was always there. But with the coming of hegemonic Brahmanism to the forefront, this has been crushed and dismantled altogether. And that is why the legacy of Buddhism is right now trapped in the collective amnesia of the people in Kerala. So what Sahodaran and Guru and all his disciples had done in Kerala modernity is that the revival of this tradition, this Sramana tradition back to the forefront, along with the Western modernity, to realize the Kerala Renaissance a reality. So Kerala's legacy of Buddhism find its reflection in various remnants of tradition. Example, when you talk about it, you can have many examples like universal literacy, education and healthcare sector, Ayurvedic tradition, Kalari, subaltern politics, the concept of equality. Wherever you find a democratic kind of a setup, you will definitely find the legacy of Sramana tradition having a root leniency there. So that is the basis, the core values of Buddhism in our culture. So talking about Ayyappan's literary pursuit, especially his poems, there is a lot of contribution that he had done through his poetry. Ayyappan's writings as well as his vivid kind of orations and public talks were actually, they are like standing out, even surpassing ages. Why? Because they were iconoclastic in one way. They were radical, they were logical, at the same time occupying all these human core values. And especially when you talk about the Bharanikku Pogalle Sodarare, there's a poem that you have written in Malayalam. In that Bharanikku Pogalle Sodarare, he was actually talking about the hegemonic kind of the heinous crimes that have committed by the hegemonic forces, especially the Brahmanic forces, on Buddhist monasteries of the time that existed in Kodungalur region. Way back in 8th or 9th century, they were considered to be the shrines of Buddhist or Jain shrines. But what happened after that is the hegemonic repression of those Buddhist representations. And as a commemoration of this hegemonic action, there is this ritualistic performance happening in the format of Bharani, in the format of Kavutintal, in this Kodingalur Kav in group. So when people are actually, especially the Dalit Bahujans, are moving over there to worship this particular event, he was actually making the people realize the real history behind it, because it's not the Bharani songs. When you look at the Bharani songs, they were full of pornographic and obscene kind of languages is being used. So it's a mindful, mindful obliteration of repressive kind of actions, hegemonic kind of atrocities that has been done on traditional Buddhist followers of the times. So what he said to the countrymen is that avoid from all these kinds of treacherous kinds of rituals and performances way back in 1920s. So when you look at the basic manifesto of Sahodara Sangam, which was started in 1970, there were 4 important lines that he have written. I would like to quote it in Malayalam. കാരണം മലയാളത്തിനാണ് അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഭംഗിയിൽ അതിനെ പറയാൻ പറ്റുക. The egalitarian concept, the basic equality concept you can see in that very 4 lines. And I am quoting it. സകലർക്കുമിത് സ്വന്തം, സകലർക്കുമിതിൽ ചേരാം, സകലരും ഒരു ജാതി സഹോദരങ്ങൾ, പുലയരും ബ്രാഹ്മണരും കരത്തോടു കരം കോർത്ത് സമതയിൽ നടക്കേണ്ടും കാലമായല്ലോ. പുലയരും ബ്രാഹ്മണരും കരത്തോടു കരം കോർത്ത് സമതയിൽ നടക്കേണ്ടും കാലമായല്ലോ. Samada, the concept of equality, how beautifully you have portrayed in it is a statement that I have to make right now. So where does all this comes from? Where does this kinds of concepts comes from? It's all from this kind of Sramana rootings. And I would like to concentrate basically on the poetry of Sahodaran Ayyappan, where you can see Buddhist revival, especially with the support of C. Krishnan, especially Midavadi Krishnan and all. He had written a load of poems reflecting these Buddhist elements in history. As I have already told you, this Kodingalur Bharani was a barbaric ritual where millions of roosters were being killed for the sake of sacrifice. And according to historian, it was a Buddhist or Jain shrine or a nunnery maybe. Later it was hijacked by this Brahmin forces, and this ritual is being carried out in commemoration of this heinous Buddhist repression of the time. There is this anthology of poems of Sahodaran Ayyappan. Around 64 poems, I think, belongs to that anthology. And the preface to anthology was written by Kusum, I think. The 64 poems are divided into 8 sections or 8 kandams. And the first kanda is Dharma Kanda, where he talks about, where the poems are talking about the ethics, the concept of morality in human life. And the second one is Raja Kanda, where the poems are mainly concentrating on statecraft, governance, polity, etc. And the third one, Swadhantriya Kanda, where the poems are basically having the thematic concern of freedom, equality, liberty and all. Then you have Yukti Kanda, as the word itself reiterates. It talks about the rationalism, the concept of rationalism and radicalism, the need to maintain such a kind of principles in our society. The fifth one is the Bauddha Kanda, where you can see a lot of poems reflecting Buddhist elements. And the sixth one is the Kada Kanda, where it talks about narrative poems. Then there is Charama Kanda, where elegies on the sad demise of great men like Srinarayana Guru were being written. And then you have the Sankirna Kanda, where complex social issues are being dealt with, the poems in it. So I am talking basically on this Bauddha Kandam, which is considered as the poetics of enlightenment, as Dr. Ajay Shekhar rightly quotes. There are actually 12 or 14 poems in it. It has a historical significance in their cultural role in Neo-Buddhist development in Kerala, led by Ayyappan, Midavadi Krishnan and C.V. Kunyiraman. The first poem is Buddha Stotram, And we can actually see how he perceives Narayana Guru as his master as a neo Buddha in this poem, because he is literally calling Narayana Guru as a neo Buddha in the annals of Kerala history through this poem. I am not going into the translation, but I am just reiterating a few lines from Buddha Stotram in Malayalam. Buddha Mune Jaya Buddha Mune, Buddha Mune Jaya Buddha Mune, മർത്യകുലത്തിന്റെ ദുഃഖത്തെ കണ്ടശ്രു വാർത്തുരു കാരുണ്യവാരിനിധേ. അമ്പുതരച്ചു പതിച്ചൊരു പക്ഷിയെ അംഗത്തിൽ വെച്ചു കരഞ്ഞവനെ. ബുദ്ധമുനെ ജയ ബുദ്ധമുനെ. And the ending note of this poem actually is something which gives you the entire thematic concern of the poem. It talks like this, it ends like this. ഭിന്നമതങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞു മനുജന്മാർ ഷണ്ട പിടിപ്പു വെറുതെ തന്നെ. എല്ലാ മതങ്ങൾക്കും നാരായവേരാകും ധർമ്മം നീ ചൊല്ലി സമന്തഭദ്രേ. ഭിന്നമതങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞു മനുജന്മാർ ഷണ്ട പിടിപ്പു വെറുതെ തന്നെ. എല്ലാ മതങ്ങളും നാരായവേരാകും ധർമ്മം നീ ചൊല്ലി സമന്തഭദ്രേ. Here we can see the all religious meet that is being conducted by Srinarayana Guru way back in Aluva in the annals of history, where he is actually telling the fact that the crux of almost all religion that you see around is just one and the same. You don't have to fight against each other for the same, because the crux and the core of each and every religion you meet is the same, the one and only same in its existence. So wherever you go, wherever you read this particular poem, you can see the statement made by Srinarayana Guru once. മതം ഏതായാലും മനുഷ്യൻ നന്നായാൽ മതി എന്നുള്ളത്. അപ്പൊ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു കോർ വാല്യൂ നമുക്ക് ഈ ഒരു കവിതകളിലൊക്കെ കാണാൻ പറ്റുമെന്നുള്ളതാണ് മറ്റൊരു സംഗതി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ ഇവിടെ കരുണയുടെ ഒരു ഭാഷ, the concept of kindness is well written in the 4 to 5 lines starting in the 4 to 5 starting lines of this poem. Adayathu, there was a story behind it when Buddha was actually seeing a bird which was being hurt by someone during the hunting process. He was actually taking out this and helping the bird. By treating that bird and making the bird getting back to its life. അപ്പോൾ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു കരുണ, ഒരു ജീവിയോട്, സഹജീവിയോട് തോന്നുന്ന ഒരു കരുണ, തൻ്റെ ജീവനെ പോലെ തന്നെ മറ്റൊരു ജീവിയോടും, ഒരു ചെറു പക്ഷിയോടും അതിൻ്റെ ജീവനോടും തോന്നുന്ന ഒരു കരുണ, അതാണ് ആ 2 വരികളിൽ പറയുന്നത്. അമ്പു തറച്ചു പതിച്ചൊരു പക്ഷിയെ അംഗത്തിൽ വെച്ചു കരഞ്ഞവനെ. That is a sort of human values that we need to ponder in our life, because kindness is more important. This is being taught by the Buddhist philosophy, and that is what Sahodaran says. Next poem that I'm going to encounter, because of the time constraint, I'm making a cherry picking of certain lines out of the poem, so bear with me. The second poem that I want to tell you is the Chadusatya Stotram. Chadusatya Stotram actually talks about 4 true values in Buddhism. Here he actually observes the vivid life sufferings that is actually happening all around the world. The ways to get rid of such sufferings are described in an order via this poem. How to get rid of this life sufferings? There are certain ways that we need to follow, and it is being said in Buddhism. So when you follow this principle, these 4 truths, you can actually get rid of this ailments, this agony, this sufferings in your life. അതും ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ അതിൻ്റെ കുറച്ച് വരികൾ പറയാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുകയാണ്. ഒന്നുമില്ല, വളരെ ചെറിയ, വളരെ സ്പഷ്ടമായ, കൃത്യമായ, എന്താ പറയുക, ഡെമോക്രാറ്റിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ലാംഗ്വേജിൽ എഴുതപ്പെട്ട വരികളാണിത്. ശരിയായ ദൃഷ്ടി, ശരിയായ ചിന്ത, ശരിയായ വാക്കും ക്രിയയതും, ശരിയായ തൊഴിൽ, ശരിയായ യജ്ഞം, ശരിയായ സ്മൃതി പ്രണിധിയും ബുദ്ധ ഭഗവാനേ. ഇതുകൾ അഷ്ടാംഗ വഴി തന്നംഗങ്ങൾ, കഥനം നീക്കേണ്ടും നിയമങ്ങൾ, മതിമാന്മാരിവ വഴിപോൽ കാക്കുന്നു അർഹസം ബുദ്ധ ഭഗവാനേ. ഇതുകൾ അഷ്ടാംഗ വഴി തന്നംഗങ്ങൾ, കഥനം നീക്കേണ്ടും നിയമങ്ങൾ, മതിമാന്മാരിവ വഴി പോൽ കാക്കുന്നു അർഹസം ബുദ്ധ ഭഗവാനെ. So they were talking about this 4 true values. What are the true values? 4 true values in this particular line. That are right words. You have to use right words in your life. Don't hurt people. Don't hurt anyone, not even a animal with your words. You should possess a right vision. Right vision is very important in your life, because if you are not following a right vision, your life will end up in a mess and the whole result would be suffering. The third one is right action. Right vision will lead you to right action. ശരിയായ കർമ്മം എന്ന് പറയും. And the right occupation. ശരിയായിട്ടുള്ള യത്നം. നീ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുന്നു? ശരിയായിട്ടുള്ള കർമ്മത്തിലൂടെ നീ ശരിയായിട്ടുള്ള യത്നത്തിലേക്ക് എത്തപ്പെടുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. By following these 4 true values in Buddhism, you can get rid of the sufferings. And that is what the poem is about. I'm just going through the thematic concerns in general. I'm not going deep into the poems altogether due to time constraint. I'm just reiterating it once again. And the third one is Panchashila. Panchashila എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു poem ഉണ്ട്. അതിൽ പറയുന്നത്, as the name indicates, Sahodaran is exhorting his countrymen to follow the path of Panchashila. I mean, follow the Panchashila principles of Buddhism to have a life deprived of sufferings and to receive a life of kindness, peace and happiness. ഇവിടെ 5 ശീലങ്ങളെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ് പറയുന്നത്. 5 ശീലങ്ങളെ പറ്റി വളരെ ഗാഹ്യമായിട്ട് എഴുതിയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. 1-2 പേജുകളല്ല, ഏകദേശം ഒരു 5ഓളം പേജുകളോളം നീങ്ങുന്ന ഒരു വലിയ കവിതയാണിത്. അപ്പൊ അതിലെ എന്തൊക്കെ പഞ്ചശീല തത്വങ്ങൾ എന്ന് എഴുതുന്ന ഭാഗത്തിലുള്ള 2 വരികൾ മാത്രമാണ് ഞാനിവിടെ റീറ്ററേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. ഫസ്റ്റ് പ്രഥമശീലം. പ്രഥമശീലം എന്താണ്? ആദ്യത്തെ ശീലം, കൊല്ലുകില്ലെന്ന വ്രതം പ്രഥമശീലം, അതു കല്യത ചേർത്തിയിടുന്നു കാരുണ്യം സുഖാവഹം. കൊല്ലുകില്ലെന്ന വ്രതം പ്രഥമശീലം, അതു കല്യത ചേർത്തിയിടുന്നു കാരുണ്യം സുഖാവഹം. The first and foremost Panchashila that you have to follow is non-violence. Avoid violence. Avoid killing anyone. Avoid hurting people as well as animals. Avoid yourself from all sorts of violence. And that is the first Panchashila tattva that you need to follow. Second one. What is the second one? Adattadanadokshmozhigum vradamagum പ്രസിദ്ധ ശീലങ്ങളിൽ രണ്ടാമതു കേൾപ്പിൻ. അദത്തദാനദോക്ഷമൊഴികും വ്രതമാകും പ്രസിദ്ധ ശീലങ്ങളിൽ രണ്ടാമത്തു കേൾപ്പിൻ. രണ്ടാമത്തെ ശീലം എന്താണ്? കളവ് ചെയ്യരുത് എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. Don't steal or rob someone else's wealth. If you have an eye on someone else's wealth, don't do that. Without the consent of others, you are not supposed to rob or steal anyone's property or anyone's mind or anyone's emotions or anything. It will give you sufferings only. And if you follow the path of, if you follow this second Panchashila, you will definitely move more towards a life devoid of suffering. What is the third one? There is a third Panchashila tattva. അത് എൻ്റെ ചെയ്യുന്ന 2 വരികളാണ് പറയുന്നത്. കാമങ്ങൾ ദുഷ്പ്രയോഗം ചെയ്യാത്ത വ്രതമല്ലോ മൂന്നാമതായ ശീലം ഭഗവതുപദിഷ്ടം. കാമങ്ങൾ ദുഷ്പ്രയോഗം ചെയ്യാത്ത വ്രതമല്ലോ മൂന്നാമതായ ശീലം ഭഗവതുപദിഷ്ടം. അതായത് renouncing the lustful desires. You have desires, but when it comes to lustful desires, it can hamper your life. So what you have to do is, don't fall into the pit of lustful desires. Avoid lustful desires to get rid of the suffering. ഏറ്റവും എന്താ പറയാ, അനാവശ്യമായിട്ടുള്ള കാമ ലീലകളിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഡിസയേഴ്സിൽ അകപ്പെടാതെ ഇരിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് നമ്മൾ പാലിക്കേണ്ട 3ാമത്തെ പഞ്ചശീല തത്വം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഇനി വാട്ട് ഈസ് എ ഫോർത്ത് വൺ? അതിൽ 4 വരികളാണ്. ചൊന്നിടാമിനെ വൃഷാവാദത്തിൻ വിരമണമെന്നുള്ള വിമലമാം 4ാമതായ ശീലം. ചൊന്നിടാമിനെ വൃഷാവാദത്തിൻ വിരമണമെന്നുള്ള വിമലമാം നാലാമതായ ശീലം കളവു പറയുകയില്ലെന്ന വ്രതമല്ലോ ഭഗവാൻ ഇതുകൊണ്ടു മുഖ്യമായി വിധിച്ചിതു. കളവു പറയുകയില്ലെന്ന വ്രതമല്ലോ ഭഗവാൻ ഇതുകൊണ്ടു മുഖ്യമായി വിധിച്ചിതു. So the fourth one is don't lie. Don't lie or don't cheat anyone. Avoid lying. Even for the sake of goodness, you are not supposed to lie. But when you look at Mahabharata, you will see that even Krishna seems to justify lying for the sake of goodness. But Buddha says that even if for the sake of goodness, you are not supposed to lie. And that is a difference between Hinduism and Buddhism. And that is the fourth Panchashila Tattva that you need to follow to get rid of suffering. Ini, what is the fifth one? The final one. Uduvil paranyidam panjamamagum sheelam lahari padarthangal ozhikkum mahavradam. Uduvil paranyidam panjamamagum sheelam lahari padarthangal ozhikkum mahavradam. Avoid the use of intoxicants. If you are getting intoxicated all the time, there is no possible chance of getting a right mind, a right kind of thought process happening in your head. If there is no right mind or right thought process, your actions will definitely end up in a mess and the result would be suffering. So avoid yourself, renounce yourself from using intoxicants. Angane fifth Panchashila Tattvangal പറഞ്ഞു വെക്കുകയാണ് ഈ പഞ്ചശീലം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ബുദ്ധകാണ്ഡത്തിലെ കവിതയിൽ. ഇനി നമ്മൾ പോകുന്നത് വളരെ ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പോയമാണ് ബുദ്ധമാർഗം. The Buddhamargam is a monumental kind. We can say it is a monumental piece of work which comes under this Buddhakanda of Sahodaran Ayyappan. Dr. Ajay Shekhar have translated Buddhamarga into the way of Buddha, and he has translated the entire poem in his the annex of this biography that he has written about Sahodaran Ayyappan. So in Buddhamargam, you can see the poems encompasses the way that must be followed stringently by a Buddhist follower along with this Panchashila Tattva as well as this eightfold path. It involves a belief in oneself as the ultimate savior of one's life. There is no one outside for you who will remain as a savior for your life, because you are the savior of your own life. There is nobody outside waiting for there to save you. So this is a very rational kind of a thought. How come a person who is actually following spiritual path can talk about this? Buddha would say so. There is an oft-quoted term of Buddhism. Whoever said it or whatever being said, don't believe it unless and until it touches your rationality. It matches with your rationality. ആരൊക്കെ എന്തൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞാലും വിശ്വസിക്കരുത് unless and until it touches or it matches with your rational thought. നിങ്ങളുടെ എന്താ പറയാ ബോധത്തിന് ഉതകുന്ന രീതിയിലല്ല അത് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് പറ്റുന്നില്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ആരെന്തു പറഞ്ഞാലും വിശ്വസിക്കരുത് എന്നാണ്. അതിനിപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞാൽ കൂടി എന്നാണ് ബുദ്ധൻ പറഞ്ഞത്. ആൻഡ് ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് എ ഡിഫറൻസ്. സോ അതിനെ നമ്മൾ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുകയാണ് അദ്ദേഹം. അത് എങ്ങനെയാണ് അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു പറച്ചിൽ എന്നുള്ളത്. He translated it like that. Man is the savior of man. No one else saves us. We are collectively comprehensive. I follow the way of Buddha. I ensure self-defense and become self-reliant without bothering others. അതിന്റെ മലയാള കവിതയാണ് കേട്ടോ അതിന്റെ ഒരു ക്രക്സ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. മർത്യനു രക്ഷകൻ മർത്യൻ, മർത്യനില്ല അന്യരക്ഷകൻ, മർത്യത്വം പൂർണ്ണമെന്നോർപ്പു ബുദ്ധമാർഗാനുസാരി ഞാൻ. മർത്യനു രക്ഷകൻ മർത്യൻ, മർത്യനില്ല അന്യരക്ഷകൻ, മർത്യത്വം പൂർണ്ണമെന്നോർപ്പു ബുദ്ധമാർഗാനുസാരി ഞാൻ. ഇതിനെ ഞാനത് അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യേണ്ട കാര്യമില്ല എന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. അതിൽ തന്നെ അതിൻ്റെ ക്രക്സ് കിടക്കുകയാണ്. There is no other savior waiting for you outside. It's within you. The real concept of Tattvamasi lies in it. If I am going more on Tattvamasi, it will become a controversy. So I am actually not going there. So Tattvamasi is at another thing. We will discuss about it in later. So now moving on to the next poem, Mahamangala Sutram. Mahamangala Sutram is actually a translated poem by Sahodaran Ayyappan from the very Buddhist language called Pali. പാലിയിൽ നിന്ന് കറക്റ്റ് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ട ഒരു പോയമാണ് മഹാമംഗള സൂത്രം. This poem talks about how we can have a peaceful coexistence, how we can have a life of peaceful coexistence without embracing failures. All these Buddhist principles described here are being practiced by Sahodaran all throughout his life. That is important. Whatever he told, he was a person who better practiced in his life. What he preaches to his people or to his countrymen were all being practiced by him in his life. That is what makes Sahodaran a unique piece, I would say. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ മഹാമംഗള സൂത്രത്തിലെ 4 വരികൾ മാത്രമാണ് പറയുന്നത്. മൂഢരെ സേവ ചെയ്യായിക, സേവ ചെയ്യുക വിജ്ഞരെ, മാണിക്യമനുരായോരെ ഇതു മംഗളമുത്തരം. മൂഢരെ സേവ ചെയ്യായിക, സേവ ചെയ്യുക വിജ്ഞരെ, മാണിക്യമാന്യരായോരെ ഇതു മംഗളമുത്തരം. അതായത് you should renounce yourself from following the path of blunderers, following the path of foolish men. Instead, you should follow the path of enlightened persons, enlightened ones. You should respect those who are supposed to be respected. And respect is not something you should call for. It should come within, right? If we wanted to respect a person, we should feel respect first. It's not about calling oneself, calling others and telling us you should respect us. That doesn't make sense. So he was telling that you should follow the path of the enlightened people. Who are the enlightened people? Think about it. Then the next poem is Dharmakurati. Dharmakurati is actually a very symbolistic kind of poem. I found it's very symbolistic with a lot of images running to and fro throughout the poem, because the land of Kerala is considered to be a mother goddess. The mother goddess named Dharmakurati, and all the perils and sufferings she is actually facing are temporary. And the poet says that it will disappear at some point of time. And what is that point of time? Because when her children get awakened by by the principles of Buddha, they will lead themselves to a life of calmness, life devoid of caste inequality, life devoid of all these kinds of untouchability, so that they will realize the purpose of one caste, one religion, and one God for all. So here he asserts the fact that there is a point in which the people of Kerala will realize this core value of the statement made by Sri Narayana Guru. So Dharmakurati is all about that. Adile kurachchu varigal maatrana parayunnathu. Satyarashmi chindum dharma ratna mama chudil, makkal madimoham poi buddharagumukke. Satyarashmi chindum ധർമ്മ രത്ന മമ ചൂടിൽ, മക്കൾ മതിമോഹം പോയി ബുദ്ധരാകുമൊക്കെ. ഒരു ജാതി, ഒരു മതം, ഒരു ദൈവം, വാക്കും ഇതുപോലെ സാക്ഷാത്കരിച്ചവർ ശാന്തി പോകും. ശാന്തി അമ്മേ, ശാന്തി അമ്മേ, ശാന്തി 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 അമ്മേ. ഒരു ജാതി, ഒരു മതം, ഒരു ദൈവവാക്യം ഇതുപോലെ സാക്ഷാത്കരിച്ചവർ ശാന്തി പോകും. ശാന്തി അമ്മേ, ശാന്തി അമ്മേ. And we are moving towards the next poem, അലറിയുടെ മുൻപിൽ. This അലറിയുടെ മുൻപിൽ is being translated by Dr. Ajay Shekhar as the Chembil tree. What is this alari? Alari tree, have you ever noticed this plant named alari? This poem actually talks about the history of Buddhism and how Buddhism reached Kerala, and the dismantling of Buddhism that happened around 10th or 11th century CE in the annals of history, which is being lamented by the Chembaga flowers, the alari flowers. Chembaga flowers are being told in South Kerala as Chembaga, and in maybe it would be called as alari flowers in some other land. Okay, I mean other parts of Kerala, not in some other land, but in other parts of Kerala. So basically this tree is actually lamenting lamenting the dismantling of Buddhism, the atrocities that is being faced by the Buddhist followers of Kerala in a very elegiac sort of rate-raging. So basically these followers actually came from Sri Lanka, the land of Iram that I have already told you, and that is the reason why the followers are being called as Iravas, and this flower is being called as Irachembagam in southern part of Kerala. So this narrative explores in which Buddhism was dismantled by this hegemonic forces of Hinduism, and the Alari flower is actually witnessing this all atrocities that's happened to Buddhism and Shramana tradition in the annals of history. So this is being written in the point of view of an Alari tree, I would say. So the translation is being written by him, Dr. Ajay Shekhar, as the temple tree. I am quoting some of the lines first, translated versions. The ruins of the shrine are found wherever it stands. This ancient tree speaks of a religion vanished from here. In Ceylon, the Sinhala Buddhists still offer this flower before the statues of the enlightened and seek his path. In Ceylon, the Sinhala Buddhists still offer this flower before the statues of the enlightened and seek his path. O tree, the mystery of your sad stature is resolved now. You are lamenting the loss of this land that abandoned Buddhism. O tree, you are lamenting the loss of this land that abandoned Buddhism. പച്ച മലയാളത്തിൽ ഇനി അതിനെ ഒന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അല്ലെ കുറച്ചു വരികൾ പറയേണ്ടത് ആവശ്യമായിട്ട് തോന്നി, അതുകൊണ്ട് പറയാണ്. ഉണ്ടീഴവച്ചെമ്പകമെന്ന പേര് തെക്കൻ പ്രദേശത്തിൽ അലറിച്ചെടിക്ക്. ഉണ്ടീഴവച്ചെമ്പകമെന്നു പേര് തെക്കൻ പ്രദേശത്തിൽ അലറിച്ചെടിക്ക്. ഈഴത്തു നിന്നീഴവർ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന ചരിത്രമല്ലോ പറയുന്നിതാ പേർ. ഈഴത്തു നിന്നീഴവർ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന ചരിത്രമല്ലോ പറയുന്നിതാ പേർ. മുടിഞ്ഞു നിൻചാരെ കിടന്നിടുന്ന കാവിനകത്താളുകൾ സേവ ചെയ്യും ശാസ്താവു ചാർത്തിടിൽ മനുഷ്യദേവ. ശാസ്താവു സാക്ഷാൽ ജിനബുദ്ധദേവൻ. മുടിഞ്ഞു നിൻചാരെ കിടന്നിടുന്ന കാവിനകത്താളുകളിൽ സേവ ചെയ്യും ശാസ്താവു പാർത്തിടിൽ മനുഷ്യദേവ. ശാസ്താവു സാക്ഷാൽ ജിനബുദ്ധദേവൻ. Here lies the conversion of Buddhist temples to Hinduist temples, and how Buddha is being converted into the Hindu god Shasta. And the Ira Chembagam, the Alari flower, is actually witnessing this. And in front of you, you can see the statues of God Buddha is being transformed into the statues of Shasta. And that is what this poem talks about. And you can see how Ira Chembaga, you actually came here with the followers of Buddhism who hail from Sri Lanka, and that is why you being called as Ira Chembaga. And the followers who brought you here were being called as Iravas. These are all history, and I am talking this history to you. So this is the way the poem moves on, and you would see how wonderfully he grafted the historical elements in each and every lines that portray wonderfully the unknown histories of Buddhism in Kerala. So I am not going deep into the poem, because if I am going like that, it will take one and a half more hour for describing the entire history of Buddhism described by the poem. So moving on to the next poem in Buddhaganda, that is Vaishaga Paurnami. As we all know, the Paurnami in Vaishaga month was celebrated as the birth date of Gautama Buddha. And the poem gives us a vivid picture of the serene nature that actually embraced Buddha's arrival to this world. And his story is being told in detail through this poem. Adile chila varigal matram cholugiyanu. How the poet actually describes the entire temperament of the environment, the entire temperament of the serene nature who welcomed the arrival of Lord Buddha to this world. The nature adorned itself, the nature embellished itself for the arrival of this great legend of time. ആടിയ മുല്ലകളിൽ തൂമണം ചുരിയുന്ന പൂവുകൾ മുറ്റിപ്പൂത്ത വീടുകളെല്ലാത്തിലും കൊന്നകളെല്ലാടവും അണിഞ്ഞു മനോഞ്ചമാം പൊന്മയ പൂത്താലികൾ ദുർഭിഷമിയാലാതെ. കൊന്നകളെല്ലാടവും അണിഞ്ഞു മനോഞ്ചമാം പൊന്മയ പൂത്താലികൾ ദുർഭിഷമിയലാതെ. പൊങ്ങിനാൽ വേനലിന്റെ മൂർച്ചയിൽ വൈശാഖത്തിൻ പൗർണമിചന്ദ്രൻ സർവസന്താപദമോഹവഹൻ. പൊങ്ങിനാൽ വേനലിന്റെ മൂർച്ചയിൽ വൈശാഖത്തിൽ പൗർണമിചന്ദ്രൻ സർവസന്താപദ മോപഹൻ. എത്രയോ മനോഹരമായിട്ടാണ് നമ്മുടെ കവി പ്രകൃതിയിലെ ഓരോ പൂക്കളും ഓരോ ചെടികളും പുഷ്പിക്കുന്നതിനെ പറ്റിയും അവ ബുദ്ധന്റെ വരവിനായി കാത്തുവെക്കുന്നതിനും സ്വയം അണിഞ്ഞൊരുങ്ങി നിൽക്കുന്നതിനെ പറ്റിയുമൊക്കെ അതിമനോഹരമായി വർണ്ണിക്കുകയാണ്. കൊന്നകൾ എല്ലായിടവും പൂത്തുലയുന്നു, മുല്ലപ്പൂക്കൾ സ്വയം പൂത്ത് അത് തൻ്റെ ചെടികളിൽ നിന്ന് താഴേക്ക് പതിക്കുന്നു. ഒരു വേനലിന്റെ മൂർച്ച, അതായത് ഏപ്രിൽ മാസത്തെ വേനൽ ചൂടിന്, ആ വൈശാഖ മാസത്തിന്റെ വേനൽ ചൂടിൽ പോലും പൗർണമി ചന്ദ്രൻ സർവസന്താപ മോപഹനെ പോലെ ഉയർന്ന് ഉദിച്ചുയരുകയാണ്. So this is a way he describes, he becomes a narrative poet in this particular poem. So you can see how much Sahodaran Ayyappan was a crafted poet during this time. We underrated him to a great extent. That's the reality. We doesn't value the poet behind Sahodaran Ayyappan. We would see him as a reformist, we would see him as a politician, we would see him as a social reformer, but hardly we see him as a poet. But these all poems will give us the crux behind the poetic, the depth of the poetry, the depth and narrative technology of the poetic chasm that was there in the hands of Sahodaran Ayyappan. And these poems will give you the reflection of the same. If you go through the lines of the poem, you would see how beautifully he have written a word picture in front of you. Not all poets can do that. Only talented ones who are poets by birth can do this kind of a miracle through their writing. So I believe that we have to work on and research more on the poetry of Sahodaran Ayyappan by considering him as a poet in the literary arena of Kerala literature or Malayalam literature per se, because he was a person who democratized the literary space of Malayali psyche for the first time in the annals of history. We should remember that all the time. And moving on to the next poem, Divasopnam. Divasopnam is being translated by Dr. Ajay Shekhar as the daydream. There is also a mythical concept behind this, because once there was Deepthy Krishna who actually told the story to Sahodaran Ayyappan, where this Kodungalur Grove is considered to be a temple of Jain, a nunnery of Buddhist followers way back in 8th or 9th century. And this monastery was actually being hijacked by the forces, the hegemonic forces later. Deepthy Krishna was not the person, it was C.V. Kunyaraman who said this story to Sahodaran Ayyappan, telling that there was a monastery behind Kodungalur temple, and there are a lot of atrocities that had happened there, and you have to write something on it, because being a poet you can do a contribution by narrating the story behind it. And now the poet Sahodaran Ayyappan is initiating the poem by on a daydreaming sort of thing, because a poet is actually lying on a small sleep, making a small nap under the banyan tree, which was named as that banyan tree has named as Saubhadram in Kodungalur. There is a banyan tree. This story is being told by C.V. Kunyaraman to Sahodaran Ayyappan, and this Saubhadram is one of the banyan trees that is being carried all the way from Bodh Gaya. And this place has an old name called Marichapuram. Marichapuram is the name of that particular place. So this observation made by C.V. Kunyiraman is the seminal idea of the poem that is being written by Sahodaran Ayyappan. And he imagined himself to be lying lying under the banyan tree for a small short nap and all. And on the course of the nap, he is actually making a daydream. And in that daydream, a mystic person appears in front of him by through the cracks of this banyan tree. And this mystic person is telling a story about the Buddhist arrival or about the Buddhist history of that place to him. How the nuns were being, molested by the hegemonic forces. How they were actually made to run away from their own sacred place. Once with the coming of this hegemonic forces, and how much atrocities they were forced to face during those times. And now the poet trying to recollect all these memories into a poetic format. And the translation goes on like this. Has anyone gone through such decline and absolute fall? All the outcasts like the Thiya, Puleya and Arya were Buddhist people. Has anyone gone through such decline and absolute fall? The absolute fall here mentions is the absolute fall of Buddhism. Can anyone say anything like such a decline happening all around the world? No, it's all about this Ramana tradition. All the outcasts like the Thiya, Puleya and Arya were Buddhist people once. So this is a small translation that he had made. I am going back to the Malayalam version. 4 lines of that has to be reiterated here. So, Shankara Shishyarayulla Kingarar Kallugudichu Madichurikkel Shundi Paranyadutti Madathin Munbil Vannayyo Handa Bhayangaranmar Shankara Shishyanmarayulla Kingarar Kallugudichu Madichurikkel Shundi Paranyadutti Madathin Munbil Vannayyo Handa Bhayangaranmar Koli Aruttaho Bhikshuni Sangathin Manabhangam Chedu Nishturanmar Koli Aruttaho Bhikshuni Sangathin Manabhangam Chedu Nishturanmar Kanyamadham Boyi Kavayadi Sthalam Annu Tundundai Kavudindal Kanyamadham Boyi Kavayadi Sthalam Annu Tuttundai Kavudindal. I don't think a separate explanation is needed for this poem, because it tells you the story of Kodungalur, Bharani, Kodungalur, Kavu, and how this Kanyamatham, the nunnery of the Buddhist nuns, were being converted into a Hinduistic place of heinous rituals, still performing. When I am talking like this, the heinous rituals are still continuing, and Sahodaran Ayyappan and his followers had done a lot of things to curtail down this kind of ritualistic performance there. And somehow we managed to contain the sacrifices of lots of roosters over there. And right now, rooster killing is not happening there. But still, the Bharani songs that is full of pornography and obscenity is still being carried out by Dalit Bahujans in that Kavu. That is the irony. That's the irony that history tries as a comic reality, and that is what happened. First as a tragedy, history repeats first as a tragedy. Second, it will repeat as a tragic comedy, and that is what happens here when you look at the history of Kodungalur. So anyway, we are moving on to the next poem, Swagata Patram, and this poem is written by Sahodaran Ayyappan during the retirement of Justice E.K. Ayyakutti as a district court judge, and this poem is being submitted to Buddhist Institute of Ernakulam. And he is actually welcoming Justice Ayyakutti. Justice Ayyakutti will later become his father-in-law while he married Parvati. And as we all know, she is also a Renaissance leader, had done many of the works in women empowerment and all that. So here Justice Ayyakutti is actually retiring from his post, and then Ayyappan is actually welcoming him to modernize the Kerala society to a caste-ridden society through following the way of Buddha by propagating the Buddhist principles all over. Because Justice Ayyakutti was so fond of Buddhism, and he written a lot of articles and poems on Buddhist philosophy and all. So he is actually welcoming him after the retirement, welcoming him to follow and to change the Kerala psyche to a more egalitarian and inclusive society. And that is the whole thematic concern of the poem. Due to time constraint, I am not reiterating the lines. Let's move on to the next poem, Sukhamargam. Sukhamargam talks about the harsh reality of life, because we all know that our life involves a lot of happiness, right? When I am talking, we know that a lot of people are crying all around because of the tragic incidents that hit us. We can't even smile. We can't produce a smile better, I think. In such a situation, we can aptly say that life is full of sufferings, isn't it? The only way that we need to get rid of the suffering is to find or seek happiness. And this poem talks about the way to achieve that kind of a happiness and peaceful life without or by avoiding the agony of sufferings to a great extent. So, this poem talks about such a peaceful way of coexistence. Okay? അതിനുള്ള ചില വരികൾ മാത്രം പാടുകയാണ്. മൃഗതൃഷ്ണാസുഖം നുകരാനായി ലോകം വിഷമിക്കുന്നിതു നിരൂപിച്ച് അലിവാർന്നു ജ്ഞാന കരുണാവാരിധി അരുളി ദുഃഖത്തിൻ പരമാർത്ഥം. മൃഗതൃഷ്ണാസുഖം നുകരാനായി ലോകം വിഷമിക്കുന്നതു നിരൂപിച്ച് അലിവാർന്നു ജ്ഞാന കരുണാവാരിധി അരുളി ദുഃഖത്തിൻ പരമാർത്ഥം. മനുജ ജീവിതം അശുഭമാത്രമായി കരുതിയിടുകയല്ല അതിനർത്ഥം. മനുജ ജീവിതം അശുഭമാത്രമായി കരുതിയിടുകയല്ല അതിനർത്ഥം. അവികല ശുഭം മനുജനലുവാൻ വഴിയോതുന്നല്ലോ ജിനദേവൻ. അവികല ശുഭം മനുജനലുവാൻ വഴിയോതുന്നല്ലോ ജിനദേവൻ. Even if the life is full of suffering, there is a way ahead. There is a middle path that you can follow in order to get rid of the suffering. And that following path is being taught by the great Buddha through his principles. Follow him. You will lead a life of happiness, at least a life of peaceful coexistence. That's what this poem talks about. And you know that how simple are we? How simple our lives are being in front of a tragic incident, in front of a natural disaster. How simple are we as humans? We are nothing. So in that sense, what we need is certain human values like kindness, like brotherhood, like happiness, like a sort of peaceful coexistence. So each and every time, these poems are actually getting relevant only. Each and every time you are rereading the poem, you are getting close to the needs of the hour, because these poems are talking about the core values that we need to follow all the time, as long as we are living a human life as such. So that's all about Sukhamargam. Now I am moving on to Onapattu. As we all know, this song is very popular in our oral tradition, and we Malayalis are very familiar, especially Dalit Bahujans are very familiar, not just Dalit Bahujans, all over. I mean, almost all the Malayalis are familiar with this song, Maveli Nadu Vaanidum Kalam. And this song was there in our oral tradition for a long time, and Sahodaran Ayyappan has actually added some of the lines to this particular oral tradition. And many of us doesn't know the lines that's being added by Sahodaran Ayyappan, which are very politically charged ones. So here I am going to read some of the lines that's being added by Sahodaran Ayyappan for the sake of your knowledge. Maveli Nadu Vaanidum Kalam Manusharellarum onnu pole ആമോദത്തോടെ വസിക്കും കാലം ആപത്തങ്ങാർക്കുമൊട്ടില്ല താനും കള്ളവുമില്ല ചതിയുമില്ല എള്ളോളമില്ല പൊളിവചനം തിണ്ടലുമില്ല തൊടിലുമില്ല വേണ്ടാതനങ്ങൾ മറ്റൊന്നുമില്ല ചോറുകൾ വച്ചുള്ള പൂജയില്ല ജീവിയെ കൊല്ലുന്ന യാഗമില്ല ദല്ലാൽ വഴിക്കീശ സേവയില്ല വല്ലാത്ത ദൈവങ്ങളൊന്നുമില്ല സാധുധനിക വിഭാഗമില്ല, മൂലധനത്തിഞ്ഞെരുക്കലില്ല, അവതരാവരർ ചെയ്തു നാട്ടിൽ ഭൂതി വളർത്താൻ ജനം ശ്രമിച്ചു. ബ്രാഹ്മണർക്കീഷ്യ വളർന്നു വന്നീ, ഭൂതി കൊടുക്കാൻ അവർ തുനിഞ്ഞു. കൗശലമാർന്നോരു വാമനനെ വിട്ടു ചതിച്ചവർ മാബലിയെ. ദാനം കൊടുത്തു സുമതി തന്റെ ശീർഷം ചവിട്ടിയ യാചകനും, അന്നു തൊട്ടിന്ത്യ അധപ്പതിച്ചു, മന്നിലധർമ്മം സ്ഥലം പിടിച്ചു. Now I am moving on to the last lines, which are very important. ആമദത്തിനായി ശ്രമിച്ചിടേണം, ആമദത്തിനു നാം ചത്തിടേണം, വാമനാദർശം വെടിഞ്ഞിടേണം, മാബലി വാശ വരുത്തിടേണം. ഓണം നമുക്കിനി നിത്യമെങ്കിൽ ഊനം വരാതെ ഇരുന്നു കൊള്ളും. ഓണം നമുക്കിനി നിത്യമെങ്കിൽ ഊനം വരാതെ ഇരുന്നു കൊള്ളും. So that is the song which talks about this egalitarian democratic setup of Dalit Bahujans, not just Dalit Bahujan, all the Malayalis in Kerala. So along with this, he has revamped the learning system of the monasteries by the formation, through the formation of Mahabodhi Foundation or Mahabodhi Sangham, and the knowledge transactions of that's being carried out by Buddhist monasteries of ancient India were being trying to revitalize through this kind of institutions by Sahodaran Ayyappan along with his contemporaries. അങ്ങനെ ഓണപ്പാട്ടിനെ പറ്റിയും മഹാബലിയെ പറ്റിയും പറഞ്ഞു തീർക്കുമ്പോൾ ഒരാളെ കൂടി വിട്ടുപോകാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിയില്ല. അത് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ജാതി ഭാരതം എന്ന കവിതയിലെ ചില വരികൾ തന്നെയാണ്. കേരളത്തിൽ ആദ്യമായി അംബേദ്കറുടെ ചിന്തകളെ പരിചയപ്പെടുത്തിയ ഒരു വ്യക്തി കൂടിയായിരുന്നു സഹോദരൻ. നമ്മുടെ ഭാരതത്തിന്റെ ഒക്കെ ഒരു ജാതീയ അവസ്ഥകളെ കൂടി വരച്ചിടുന്ന ഒരു മനോഹരമായിട്ടുള്ള ചിത്രം നമുക്ക് മുന്നിൽ വരച്ചിടുന്ന കവിതയാണ് ജാതി ഭാരതം. അതിലെ ചില വരികൾ കൂടി. ജാതി കുശുംബാർഷമേന്മ പൂണ്ടു ഭാരതഭൂമിയിൽ സാധുവർഗ വളർച്ചയ്ക്കു വച്ചു ക്രൂരവിലക്കുകൾ. പടിഞ്ഞാറൻ നാഗരികം പടിഞ്ഞാറിന്റെ കോയ്മയും തെല്ലൊന്നിളക്കി അങ്ങിങ്ങു ജാതിക്രമ സനാതനം. പരാധീനതയോർത്തൊടു ഖേദിച്ചില്ലാർഷ സന്തതി, ജാതി പോകുന്നതിൽ മാത്രം ആധിയാർന്നവരെപ്പോഴും. ആർഷത്തിന്റെ ചവിട്ടേറ്റു ഞെരിഞ്ഞുള്ള ജനാവലി, അസ്വതന്ത്രേന്ത്യയിൽ സ്വന്തം സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം കണ്ടുമുട്ടിനാർ. അവരിൽ നിന്നൊരു മഹാൻ പൊങ്ങി വന്നു മഹോജ്വലൻ, ധീവൈദൂക്ഷി ശേക്ഷികളാൽ വിസ്മായിത ഭാരതൻ. അധസ്ഥോദ്ധാരണം മുഖ്യ ജീവിതവ്രതമാക്കിയോൻ, ആരോട് മതിനായേറ്റു ജയക്കൊടി പരത്തിയോൻ. അംബേദ്കർ എന്ന തന്നാമ ചതുരക്ഷരി മന്ത്രമായി ജപിക്കും നന്ദി തിങ്ങുന്ന ഹൃത്തഴും ഭാവി ഭാരതം. അംബേദ്കർ എന്ന തന്നാമ ചതുരക്ഷരി മന്ത്രമായി ജപിക്കും നന്ദി തിങ്ങുന്ന ഹൃത്തഴും ഭാവി ഭാരതം. And as a final note, I am trying to read the 4 lines which seems to embrace almost all the value system that is being propounded by this great man Sahodaran Ayyappan in the annals of history. നമുക്കെപ്പോഴും ആവശ്യമായിട്ടുള്ള ഇന്നത്തെ കാലത്ത് പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും നമ്മളെല്ലാവരും ഒരു ദുരന്ത ഭൂമിയെ അഭിമുഖീകരിച്ച് നിൽക്കുമ്പോഴൊക്കെ നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിൽ എപ്പോഴും പറഞ്ഞുകൊള്ളാവുന്ന, നമുക്കൊക്കെ വേണ്ടത് പണവും സമ്പത്തും പണവും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ രാഷ്ട്രീയ ബന്ധങ്ങളും അധികാരങ്ങൾക്കും അപ്പുറം എപ്പോഴും നമുക്ക് ഓർമ്മിക്കാവുന്ന 4 വരികൾ. ആ വരികൾ എന്നും ഓർമ്മിച്ചാൽ, അതെന്നും മറക്കാതിരുന്നാൽ ഒരു പക്ഷേ നമുക്ക് ഈ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ജീവിതത്തിലെ കഷ്ടതകളൊക്കെ കുറച്ചൊന്ന് ലഘൂകരിക്കാൻ പറ്റിയേക്കും. ആ വരികൾ ഇങ്ങനെയാണ്: എനിക്കെല്ലാത്തിലും മൈത്രി, എനിക്കെല്ലാവരും സമം, എനിക്കെങ്ങും സ്വതന്ത്രത്വം, ബുദ്ധമാർഗാനുസാരി ഞാൻ. എനിക്കെല്ലാത്തിലും മൈത്രി, എനിക്കെല്ലാവരും സമം, എനിക്കെന്നും സ്വതന്ത്രത്വം, ബുദ്ധമാർഗാനുസാരി ഞാൻ. This has been taken from The Way of Buddha. Thank you for listening.